97.3 ESPN presents The Sports Bash with Mike Gill. It's time for Football at 4 with 97.3 ESPN.com's Andrew DiCecco. Powered by InsideTheBirds.com.
He's in! Touchdown!
Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, it's Football at 4.
Right now, we get into the NFL. A lot to dive into on this Friday edition in which, the NFL is got a lot of hurdles going on, man. We heard yesterday that the Hall of Fame game canceled, Hall of Fame weekend canceled. We saw that the NFL is selling advertising for its first 8 rows of seats now, essentially closing the ability to sit in those seats for the 2020 season. There's a lot out there to kind of chew on, all that and more. Some Eagles as well with Andrew DiCecco as he joins us on Happy Hour Friday. Have you had your IPA of choice yet?
I selected what I'm going to go with this weekend. It's going to be called One Man Mosh Pit by Surly Brewing Company.
I like that. He came prepared this week. One Man Mosh Pit. All right.
Yeah.
You didn't start yet, though, did you?
Not yet.
Seemed disappointed with that answer. Like, right? Oh, not yet.
I mean, that was just like, no. Not yet. All right, before we get into some of the off-the-field things that are going on, you just wrote the latest All-22 look at Matt Pryor. I want to bring that up here to kind of see, as you did a little deep dive on him, because he's the guy that I think everybody's wondering about. We had Trey Thomas on about a week ago to kind of break him down. Mm-hmm. What did you see in Matt Pryor for this All-22 breakdown?
Well, with Matt Pryor, first of all, it's very irrational to kind of base, players' strengths or limitations off of just 79 offensive snaps in his professional career. But what I did see, Mike, in his limited opportunities against the Seattle Seahawks, in which he started for Brandon Brooks, was an athletic lineman that, he made a couple plays that you anticipate seeing from young linemen. Like, he kind of gave up on a block, thought the play was over. His defensive end kind of rushed over the side and got Josh McCown from behind. Those things happen typically with young players, but, he did a lot of things that I really liked, as far as getting to the second level, and he had some really nice blocks on Bobby Wagner, and he moves very well, and he's strong, and his size really stands out, being, 6'7", 340 pounds.
So I'm not going to say, hey, after watching 79 snaps, do you feel confident that he can handle the job? But I guess the question would be, after watching him on tape and getting a chance to really study him more, do you feel confident that he can handle the role? Like, do you feel like, he deserves this shot?
Well, this is his third season in the Eagles system, and he does deserve that shot, provided that he showed the Eagles enough in his opportunities that he can handle it. But I think they're taking the right approach with Matt Pryor as far as not rushing to sign a veteran offensive lineman, which I do anticipate them doing just for competitive circumstance, just to bring somebody in to challenge him. He's going to get the opportunity moving forward, and but let's not forget Nate Herbig, who's there. Luke Juriga, who's an undrafted free agent, who I really like. You also have we got Opeta. That's right. You have Opeta there. So they have a handful of young linemen that are going to challenge them.
Driscoll.
Let's not forget Jack Driscoll as well, who I don't necessarily know if he'll be ready to go play a prominent role this year. I think more so for the future. I like his intangibles a lot. I think he can play tackle, guard, and even center. So they do have some bodies there, but I think that, Matt Pryor is the right guy going into training camp to kind of hold that spot down. And, we're going to see what happens here as far as the veteran lineman. We talked about Larry Warford. We talked about Ronald Leary and some of those names. So expect that in the coming weeks.
Trey Thomas did mention how important it was that he had success on the road in New York when he got thrown into the game once Brandon Brooks got injured. How important was it, and how big is it that he did his job very well, factoring in the silent count and all?
It was very impressive, and Hunter, and when you go back and think about another young offensive lineman that didn't fare as well against New York, and Winston Justice, we all remember that game. I believe it was 2006. To see Matt Pryor, like you said, with the in a critical point of the season where they had so much riding on it, to step in there and play so admirably, and show encouraging signs of a player that he can become down the line. You know, that kind of speaks volumes to Jeff Stoutland and the work that he's put in with Matt Pryor throughout his 3 years. I guess it was 2 years at that point. And you know, kind of the natural progression which we should be seeing this summer, as far as, you know, becoming we thought he was going to be the swing tackle and take over that big V role, but you know, the more I've watched him, I think that he could adequately step in there and replace Brooks.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Recently, there was a list of the top cornerbacks. Darius Slay was not on that list. I saw you kind of interject there. While you didn't put him in your top 3 or 4, are people, I don't want to say overvaluing or overrating Slay, but would you put him in the top 10 in the league?
That's a good question, Mike. And I actually compiled my own list. I guess it was in May. I had Darius Slay as the 7th or 8th ranked corner. I think, you know, he had a down year last year. That's kind of the entire Lions secondary didn't play particularly well. But when you look at his body of work and what he can do and take away the opposition's top pass catcher and play in the inside, play on the outside, and, you know, kind of hold that crown as being a prominent top corner. He's being very over. I couldn't believe that he wasn't in the top 10 there. You know, it's kind of hard to dispute Stephon Gilmore being 1, and I have Jalen Ramsey at 2, and then Tre'Davious White at 3, who I don't even believe that Tre'Davious White was even on that list, or he may have been, you know, 10th, and then 4th I have Marlon Humphrey, but after that it's kind of up for debate, and you know, I think I had Darius Slay right in front of Jair Alexander.
He definitely did have a down year last year, but do you think that Jim Schwartz's scheme could help him bounce back?
Yeah, I do. And the funny thing about Jim Schwartz is he's had to kind of get creative over the past over his 5 years in Philadelphia, I guess 4 years in Philadelphia, because he really hasn't had that premier corner. So he's had to kind of do some smoke and mirrors, so to speak. And now he has the freedom that we're going to get to see what he can actually do when he has that shutdown corner to take away the top receiver. And you might see a little bit more, you know, liberties with his blitzes that he hasn't been really known for. And you could see a different Eagles defense, a more aggressive Eagles defense, I would say.
Yeah, and Slay, you know, one of the things that I'm interested to see is how Schwartz ends up using him here. But I want to ask you, as we get close to training camp now, we are less than a month away, hopefully, right about a month away, I guess we should say. That's going to be one of the bigger storylines is what's he going to do with Slay and who will be the guy opposite him?
Yeah, we were talking about the camp battles and how there really isn't any true camp battles anymore. Most of these roster decisions are kind of predetermined during the offseason. And when you look at the Eagles, you got the 3rd defensive end role that's going to be one of the main competitions to watch, and you're going to have the number 2 cornerback role. It's another main competition to watch, and it's going to come down to Avonte Maddox and Sidney Jones. Now, I think in a perfect scenario, the Eagles would like for Sidney Jones to win that spot. You know, they've waited around for him to kind of turn the corner, and they invested draft capital in him in 2017 when he was coming off the Achilles injury. I think they would ideally like Avonte Maddox to be a movable chess piece where they don't have to necessarily put him on the outside. They can put him in the slot. They can even put him at safety, which they have in the past. So having Sidney Jones win that role, I think that ultimately will make the defense overall better, so you can kind of move around Maddox and take advantage of matchups.
What should we expect from Roby Coleman? I know earlier in the offseason there was an article saying that he was one of the best snags of the offseason. How impactful could he be to this team?
Yeah, I've written about Nickel Roby-Coleman also. I thought that was one of the best signings that the Eagles had over the offseason, a really underrated signing. Didn't get a lot of guaranteed money, so, you know, many may have not viewed that signing as somebody who's going to be, you know, a significant part of the team's future. But I've watched a lot of film on Nickel Roby-Coleman. He's only 5'7", 5'8" on a good day, but he's scrappy, he's tough. He doesn't back down from any challenge against any receivers. He's a proficient tackler, and he drives on the football. So those are the type of things that I think that he can kind of bring, along with Darius Slay, that attitude and that ferocity to a secondary that it really hasn't had in recent years.
Hey, when you look at Will Parks, okay, we brought this up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, Adam brought him up yesterday during Football at 4. When you look at Will Parks, I think Greg Cosell was on Inside the Birds podcast talking about, how good this guy is. And, do you look at him as a guy that is a starting player that the Eagles have plans to start him? I mean, should people be more excited about him now that we've, kind of done some more digging and people have watched more film on him?
Yeah, so Will Parks is a very intriguing player because not only did you hear Greg Cosell speak so glowingly about Will, but I also was on one of the Broncos flagship stations in March, and when we were talking about, the draft and stuff, they kind of I asked them about Will Parks, and they were just so effusive in their praise for Will Parks and said, you're getting an explosive, dynamic player that hasn't yet scratched the surface of his capabilities, and you're getting a great teammate and someone who's going to thrive in the community and be an asset. So when I kind of dove into some of the things that Will Parks does, he's so intriguing because he can do a multitude of different things. Now, he hasn't played in a starting capacity yet, so that really needs to play out this summer. But when you see all the different roles that he can play for a team, he can play single high, he can play the box, he can play corner. So I think that I think he's a more athletic version of what they are hoping to get out of Jalen Mills. Jalen Mills has the advantage of being in the system for a number of years. So I think it'll be highly dependent on how quickly he picks up the system this summer.
And I asked that on the heels of all the Jamal Adams stuff. Like, all right, the Eagles name is in there. How realistic. I don't think we think the Eagles are actually going to pick up the phone and make a realistic call to the Jets. But is it even a necessity that they need that big of an upgrade at the safety position with what they have? Parks, Jalen Mills, Kayvon Wallace.
Well, Jamal Adams is one of my favorite players in the NFL. I think he changes any defense. He's the top
enough that you would trade a high-profile player like a Goddard or an Ertz?
Right, that's where I was getting to. No, I heard you and Hunter talking about that. I believe it was a couple days ago. That's not something that I would do just yet. And the reason being for that, Mike, is because we haven't seen enough out of the wide receiving core yet. They're vastly unproven. You have a lot of pieces in place, but with so much unproven commodities at the wide receiver position and health and various and other variables, you look and you see you have 2 top 10 tight ends. So I think that you kind of have an embarrassment of riches there, but you also have 2 players that can move around formations and do a myriad of different things on offense. So I think that kind of has its own value, and it's kind of hard to give up one of those assets and trade them for a safety at a position that the Eagles really haven't historically placed a premium value on. A team to watch for, however, for Adams, kind of going to division rival, the Dallas Cowboys. I don't know if you guys saw yesterday, Tony Pauline actually reported that there's a player that they're interested in, that the Jets are interested in, and that's right tackle La'el Collins. So, I mean, we'll see if something happens there. Obviously, Dallas has their own financial issues over there with, having to pay all these different guys. So it'd be kind of hard to configure, but that was on one of Jamal Adams' teams on his list. So we'll kind of see how that plays out.
Hypothetically, which tight end do you think has more value? Is it Zach Ertz, even though you got to factor in his age and the contract extension in the future, or Dallas Goedert, who is a young version and his stats would probably be even better on a team without someone like Zach Ertz?
That's a great question, Hunter, because I've always been a huge Dallas Goedert advocate. I always felt that he should have been used more in the offense, and they should be used more in the offense. But, when you look at what Zach Ertz brings to the offense, and he's despite all of his gaudy statistics over the years, and he still is overlooked somehow. And when you look at what Carson Wentz needs, and that's his security blanket, and Zach Ertz is, a top tight end in football. So I think if you had to choose between the two, I think you would have to probably move Goddard, even though I do feel that he can bring more. I think his potential is a little bit greater. I think you have the known commodity there with Ertz and that rapport with Carson Wentz. So it's kind of hard to part with that.
It's interesting, because there's a lot of people were like, we have people texting in like, Ertz is the security blanket. And I said, I think Goddard would be equally the security blanket. Like if he had the same number of snaps, I don't think you would see a big difference in numbers. Do you?
No, I mean, and that's fair because in Goddard's opportunities that he's had, he's made plays. I mean, I believe he was ninth in receptions for tight ends last year in pretty much in a backup role. So I mean, imagine what he would be like if he was getting the snaps and the looks that Ertz was getting. I think that's a fair argument. But when you look at what Zach Ertz brings to the locker room and his history with Wentz and I mean and everything that he brings to the offense, I think that it's kind of hard to part with that off of something that you're kind of projection.
All right, so I want to talk a little Carson Wentz on this Friday here as we kind of get into the weekend, see what your take is. Now, they were doing Pro Football Talk, their top 40 quarterbacks. They had Carson Wentz at number 6. Now, I was a little surprised not that he was that high, but just that people put him that high. I think that he's got some people feel that he's got stuff to prove, but I like what they wrote, okay? They said about him getting hurt and that there was questions to whether he's truly the guy. And they wrote, he is, period. In late 2019, with the team on the ropes and pretty much everyone injured, that he took his game to another level. And that was coming off the injury from the year before. So my question is, maybe he didn't have his best season last year and his numbers were kind of good. They weren't like eye-popping. But should we be much more excited about this quarterback knowing what he did in those final games and knowing that he was coming off that injury and now going into this season than maybe we feel like we are?
Yeah, I think that's part of that's a big reason why there's so much anticipation growing with this Eagles season. It's because of, you saw what Carson Wentz was kind of able to elevate his play with, less than ideal weapons to work with. He made the most out of them, and he elevated their play, which is what great quarterbacks do. They elevate the play of those around them. We saw that happen so frequently and earlier in Tom Brady's career when he was playing with David Patton and Drew Brown and those guys. So I think that there's Carson Wentz really, in less than ideal circumstances, he really took his game to the next level, like I was saying. And now that he has these deep threats, and he'll ideally have Deshaun Jackson healthy for at least a vast majority of the season, you're really going to get to see the Carson Wentz, I believe, of 2017. And, he's being underrated by some, but I mean, we kind of got to see, great quarterbacks, like I was saying, they make the most of the weapons that are given to them. And that's what he did. And one thing that really stuck out when I listened to Greg Cosell on the Inside the Birds podcast, is I believe he said that there was a GM out there that said that I guess he had Pat Mahomes and Carson Wentz as the two best quarterbacks in football. That's how he regarded Carson Wentz. So to hear him in that, kind of being thought of in that light, really stuck out to me, and kind of gives folks an idea of how he's viewed around the league. I think he's viewed a little bit differently around the league than maybe he is among fans in some regards.
Andrew DiCecco, Football at 4, powered by InsideTheBirds.com. Make sure you check out the latest Inside the Birds podcast with Andrew Brandt, who said, I know they're starting, but I'm not sure anyone will finish. And then that on the heels of something that Malcolm Jenkins said, like he won't feel safe unless this thing is completely, eliminated. I don't think that anybody believes that will happen. Is football, as this week has gone on, we talked to you on Tuesday. Well, since then, the Hall of Fame game's been canceled. The NFL has agreed to map off the first 8 rows of seats in every stadium with a tarp so that fans can't get close to the players. They're going to put ads on those tarps that can be seen on television. That and other things. Is the NFL starting to feel a little shaky about the beginning of this season?
Well, I do think that training camps, I think the NFL seems, as since we last spoke, it seems incredibly adamant on getting training camp at least started on time. They're taking the proper protocols. You saw all the different things they've done just in the last 24 hours to kind of go to these lengths to make sure that they have everything, all their bases covered. Then you look at Malcolm Jenkins and the comments that he made, and you wonder if there's going to be other players that feel that same way. Also, looking into the college game, are there guys that are going to be that would be entering the NFL draft that are going to be a top, first, second round picks that might feel the same way as far as, I know that I'm taking my job seriously, but how can I be sure that, 50 of my teammates are taking this or are approaching the off season, taking this virus seriously and practicing social distancing and doing all these different things. So you may see college players, if there is a season, sit this one out, or at least not play an entire season because of the fear of COVID-19. So you're starting to see all these different scenarios kind of play out as the days go on. But yeah, I mean it's definitely something that's going to be telltale.
Hey, we were talking. I don't know how it came up yesterday about the Jets, and we said, hey. DiCecco covered the Jets for a little while here.
Yeah.
What was Gase like?
Gase was a very he was subdued at his press conferences. He didn't really. To me, he didn't kind of invoke that leadership mentality that you see so many different coaches, and they kind of convey that in their demeanor and press conferences and how they speak to the media. You see his past history with players, whether it was Jarvis Landry in Miami or some of the guys here with the Jets. And I know that I was there for the Monday Night Football game when they played the Cleveland Browns, and there's that was late in the game. If you remember, it was a terrible game, but Jamal Adams got benched late in the game. And there was a lot of speculation in the press box as to what was going on. And it turned out that, I guess, Gase's explanation was that he had a couple, unnecessary roughness penalties or a couple, he was kind of bordering on the edge there of getting ejected. And I think he said it was a precautionary move. But right then and there, to me, it kind of struck me as maybe, the beginning of a potentially fractured relationship, because you're kind of, you're looking at his past, at Gase's history. So, I mean, you can kind of see how his demeanor can rub guys the wrong way.
I think the conversation came up because we were talking about Sam Darnold's ceiling. So what do you think Sam Darnold's ceiling is, and do you think he would thrive under a Doug Peterson offense?
Yeah, that's a great question, Hunter, because last season I was actually all in on Sam Darnold. I felt that he was going to have that breakout season. Of course, after the first game, he came down with mono, and he really, I guess he took nearly 2 months off, and you saw the whole Luke Falk debacle and the Trevor Siemian injury. You kind of got to see what he was able to do. We saw him in the Dallas game elevate his play. I think that with the proper coaching staff around him and the proper weapons, remember they upgraded significantly. They had no receivers last year. They brought Demaryius Thomas back. He really didn't have much to give. Quincy Enunwa suffered a season-ending neck injury. Jamison Crowder was their best option because Robbie Anderson was, a little bit inconsistent and kind of was very sporadic in his performances. He would have some games where he would kind of disappear, and other games where he would really show up and play. So he didn't really have a ton of guys. Chris Herndon was suspended. So now that he has all these weapons in place, Hunter, there's a reason for optimism when you look at what Sam Darnold can bring to an NFL offense, and I think you're going to see him take his game to the next level.
Andrew DiCecco at DiCecco NFL Football at 4. He's back on Tuesday. We'll have plenty of NFL next week as we're going to start doing a deep dive into the divisions. We'll do our two-a-days starting Monday next week with the Football at 4 guys. We'll start to look inside each division at the individual teams, and we'll take a deep dive, and that will lead us right into Eagles training camp at the end of the month. Happy Hour Friday. Andrew DiCecco, always a pleasure, my friend.
Absolutely, guys. Have a great weekend.
And he, like all guests, appeared via the Boardwalk Honda Hotline.